Okay, welcome back, everybody. So in this stream, we're going to be doing some work with client-side caching. And in particular, we're going to look at the GraphQL Apollo implementation in iOS. And we're going to fix up our the behavior of our watch list because right now, if we took a look at our watch list, the behavior isn't great. If you go ahead and delete one, you'll notice that it basically reloads everything rather than just removing it from here, right? So you'll see there's like this flash of the loading, and then it reloads the entire list, which isn't what we want, right? Apollo has a client-side cache. If we're looking at the docs here, right, it has two types of caches: an in-memory cache and a SQLite cache. I'm just using the in-memory cache right now, which for the most part is fine for my needs. And it's all set up, and there's really not much to it, so I'm going to kind of skip over that. But the challenge that I have is that GraphQL can be, or the Apollo implementation is good when you are just doing basic queries, right? So it will, if you do a query for a list of items and they have IDs, you can override this cache key for object function, which will return specific IDs for your objects, and then it will cache those or update those appropriately. However, one of the things that you have to do manually is that when you do a mutation, you have to, as I understand it, manually update the cache. And so this is why direct cache access exists. And you'll see it says, this functionality is useful when performing mutations or receiving subscription data. You should always update the local cache to ensure consistency with the operation that was just performed. Ability to write to the cache directly also prevents you from needing to refetch data over the network after a mutation is performed. So this is exactly what we want to do, right? If you update the watch list, whether you're adding or deleting, you don't want to have to refetch the entire set of things right after that. Now, in theory, in a kind of a simultaneous multi-device, multi-user system, that may be actually what you want. You may need to refetch things if you're sitting there on two devices and messing with your watch list. But we're kind of just assuming right now, or at least I'm assuming that that this is going to be the way it works. Let's get into, I've done an example of this with some other objects in my app, but I'm going to go through this because this was not exactly, while the docs are very good, it can be a little confusing as to how and why you should do this. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So let's take a look at the network class real quick, and we'll see the cache setup here, right? So on our Apollo client, right, when we set our network transport, we can also set a store, and I'm just setting the in-memory normalized cache. Nothing too exciting. Now, this client cache key for object is really important, right? This thing is what is how you tell Apollo, hey, this is the unique ID for a given object, right? And this is really important, right? So I've filled this out with all of the, call it the objects that, all of the domain objects that I have. The one thing that I'm not exactly clear about, and I've only seen this with one of my objects, is sometimes you get an Apollo reference, and sometimes, or most of the times, you get a JSON object. It's not exactly clear to me why this is. I need to dig into this a bit more. But typically what will happen is that they pass through an object into this closure. The first object, right, underscore type name, it's essentially a map, right? It's a JSON object, is the type. So basically, I just say, hey, what's the type of this? I switch on the type. And then basically from there, I actually kind of introspect the object further. And in most cases, I'm just using the symbol or the stock ticker, right, as the ID. In other cases, right, I actually have an ID. So from here, let's take a look at, and let's read the docs real quick, because it wasn't exactly immediately obvious to me how and why this works, but we'll take a look, right? So first thing to note, similarly to the Apollo React API, you can directly read and update the caches as needed using Swift in-out parameters. So Swift in-out parameters, so what are they? This is if you have a background in C or C++ or other languages where you can pass things, by reference. This is a way for you to denote that a function takes in essentially a reference, so that that function can actually modify those parameters values, right? If you're coming from like Java or something like that, that is always passed by value. This is something, maybe it's new to you or something that you've never used before. But basically, if you set these this in-out keyword on your variables or on your parameters, this will allow the actual function or the closure that you pass these things to actually modify the variables. And if we look at the function signature for this within read transaction, we'll see why this is really important. So let's go ahead and look at a I have some extension functions on the Apollo store, right, that kind of do this. I was testing this out earlier. And if we go ahead and look at the update function, right, you give it a query, and then basically you give it a body or a closure, right? Now, notice here, right, they're saying that the data that they're passing to you is an in-out parameter. And what happens in this function, right, is it basically sends the query against the cache that you're querying for. It then tries to give you that data, right? So it calls the body function that you're passing in, and it's passing you a reference to the data. So meaning it's giving you the opportunity to use this data. You change the data in your function or in your closure, and then it writes that data back to the cache. Okay. And again, right, it's a little difficult to parse out what, or at least it was for me, right? Once you kind of know that and understand that mental model, right, this example becomes very clear. But it was not clear to me when I initially read this, many times. So let's do this. We'll try this out in action, and we'll see what we can get, right? So if we go over to our watchlist view model, right, we've got a couple different functions. And basically, when we remove and add, if there was a successful operation, in here, we need to modify the cache, right? Or we need to update the cache, okay? Because again, like it says in the docs, useful when performing mutations or receiving subscription data, you should always update the local cache to ensure consistency with the operation that was just performed. So we are likely going to call something on the store here, right, to update the cache with the operation that we just completed. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start with remove, right? So when we remove, we're basically remove watch list from cache. And the thing that we're going to be passing in is the symbol, right? That's the symbol that we are going to be removing. And so we are going to say within a read-write transaction, and then we are going to pass it a closure here. We are going in essentially the transaction, right? And in here, this is where we can actually do the update. All right. So we will just do some basic stuff here just in case something goes wrong. Unable to remove watch list from the cache. So now, so basically we start a transaction, if you will, and then we need to actually update the cache. So what are we going to do, right? So we're going to call tx.update. And the query that we want to update is essentially the query that is changing when this happens. So when someone adds or removes something from the watch list, we are effectively changing the get watch list query, right? Because we want, when someone calls get watch list again, we want that to appropriately update. And so that's what we want to actually update. So we want to update that in this block, and we are being passed the data, right? And when it updates, right, it's calling this function, right? So this try body is literally calling this function, right? And so it's basically saying, hey, please update this data, and I'm going to pass it to you, right? And this is, again, it's an in and out variable. So this data right here is in and out, right? You can think of that as in and out. And so now what it's saying is please update this, okay? So in this case, right, we will, oops, forgot this. So in this block, we now need to go ahead and update this. Okay, so we are going to say data.watchlist, right? So again, in here, we want to modify this. So we're going to set the watch list to the watch list with the item that we want removed filtered out, right? So we want to filter out item, and we want to make sure that the item with this symbol gets filtered out. And that's the symbol that was passed in. Okay, so again, in here, we're modifying the data that's being passed in. We're setting the watch list to be the watch list with the item removed, right? Yep, I forgot the try right there, right? So again, this is it's a little confusing at first, but then it starts to kind of make sense as you read it and do it over again, right? But the idea here is when this is updated, when someone removes this, I want to grab the store and remove the watch list item from the cache. And actually, I may have this wrong. I think we need to pass in, yeah, ID. So rather than symbol, this should be ID, and we want this to be item.id, ID, right? Because we're not using symbols, we're using IDs, right? So then we're just passing in the ID. So again, very simple. We do our network query. If it's successful, we then need to modify the cache, and we're asking the store, or we're asking our extension function, hey, please remove this item from the cache. We start a transaction on the cache. We then tell the cache we're going to update. GraphQL, or the Apollo implementation, will give us back the data that you get if you were to run get watchlist query, right? It gives you all the items. You modify that, and then it applies that to the cache, okay? So we can do the same thing for add, right? This is basically just the opposite. And so in this case, right, we just want to add this item, which will be down here. And what we're going to want is to make sure that we have the ID and the symbol, right? So here we're going to do the same thing. We want the ID string and the symbol, right? Because we need those to put those into our cache, because a watch list item, well, here we'll do append, right? And then we're going to give it a watch list item. So item equals get watch list query dot data dot watch list, right? And then we can give it an ID and a symbol. This is just going to be the ID, and then the symbol, oops, we put that on remove, is going to be here, right? And then we're going to append that item to the watch list. And this should be what we want. That is a watch list item, yep. Oh. I'm guessing this is a destructive operation, right? Yeah, because this actually just puts it onto the array. Yeah. Func mutating. Yeah, it's mutating, right? So yeah, then we just append the item. So again, same principle, same behavior. So we're going to say network.client.apollo.store.add watch list from cache. And we need the result. And we're going to call result.id and result.symbol. Right? So the item that we got back, and so this is why it's important, right? In Apollo, when you add or remove something, right, you want to make sure that you return at least the ID, or particularly when you add something, right, you want to actually return the full object with the ID from your API. That way you can update the cache, right? So now we have this cache behavior here, and since we've done that, we no longer have to call our load function. So that should get rid of our flashing and all of that stuff, and everything should be nice and clean now and in sync, right? So let's go ahead and run this, and we will see what we get. Oh, for here we need to leave this, yep. Okay, so now our watch list should load here. Just a moment. And when we remove this now, we're no longer going to see the flash, and it should just be, well, it's going to delete, which is probably why it's loading. And then it should be in good shape, unless there is a bug of sorts. Actually, when we remove and we add, we don't need to do loading. But that's interesting. I wonder why it's... So maybe we have a bug. Let's take a look here. Oh, yeah, I know why. If we set it to loading, but then we never actually load afterwards, it's going to be stuck here, right? So, okay, so if we reload this, right, the item that I just removed should be good there, right? So, yeah, so if I delete, right? Okay, so maybe we have something wrong with our cache implementation. Maybe we have something wrong. So the item comes back, but if we go back this way, it's actually removed. Okay, so what's happening here is that our local state is getting out of sync with our existing state. So I'm guessing that we need to remove this item here from the actual state. So we are asking this to remove. We're coming in here. We are making the network call to remove it and updating our cache, but we are no longer actually, we're not updating this, right? This current state object that has our list of items. So we need to remove that from the local state. So let's do that. Which is similar to this. Like this. But I don't think we can do this. We have to, yeah. So this is the other slightly odd thing here. So can you cast or try to cast a variable as a associated enum? I don't know if you can do that. Huh. So like what I really want to do, right, is so rather than doing this, is I essentially want to just do a cast, right? If I want to do, you know, items, equals, or I want to say really like current state is state as dot, right? Right, I want to like cast it, which I don't think you can do. I think you just have to do it this way, which is fine. We can do that. If the state is this, we're going to get the item, and then we are going to items dot remove well, we can either remove it or we can figure out where it is. So it's actually, it might be advantageous to just change this, and we'll put this into the view model. So rather than passing in the ID, we will pass in this. And then we'll just do this in the view model, which will make quite a bit more sense anyways. At least I think. So then this is going to go here. And now we need to get an ID. Which is a little trickier. Because now we're going to basically like be putting this whole thing in here, right? And then this is going to be items.remove at offset. Yep, there we go. And then this is item.id, right? Items is immutable. Oh yeah, because it's our state object. No, we can't do that. So what we need to do is just set our, what we really need to do is just set our the item, but we don't necessarily need to do like a view update. Although what do we do? I have the same problem here. What did I do here? Oh, I did update this state. Okay. Oh, because I returned them all back. Ah, got it. Okay. So we can do something similar. So we're going to remove this. And so really what we're going to do is after we remove it, and again, right, this is going to be the results. And when you remove, we're not actually returning the ID. So let's fix that. Let's go to our watch list mutation. And this should be returning the, well, this should really just be returning an ID. So when we remove symbol, this can just return input.id, right? We're going to have to deploy this though, so let's get that up there. So we want to return ID when removing from watch list. And we're going to have to update our schema here, which will be fine, not a big deal. The joys of refactoring stuff on the fly. So really, right, this is going to be like result.id. Now our query is going to have to change, so let's open up remove watch list item this, we can now ask for at least the ID back. We will update our query in a moment, but that will fix this. And when this happens, self.state equals the success of the items and filter out any item .id that does not equal the result.id. And we're going to need to do the same thing here for adding. But in this case, we're going to add the item that came back. This is going to be result. We might want to add an extension function to this type, which will return us a watchlist item. So let's go to where we define watchlist or watchlist item, right? And similar to where we have this, we can also do another extension function. Extension on add symbol to watchlist item will return the watchlist item, and then we will return a watchlist item, the ID, and this will be self.id and right, self.symbol, but this is going to be dot actually maybe we want add symbol, add watchlist item mutation dot data dot add symbol to watchlist. There we go. Okay, so then here, when we remove, it's just this, but when we add, it's just result dot. This should be to watchlist. But we have to fix this. Let me check on if our deployment is complete here real quick. All right, looks like it is. So now we need to do our code gen. Let's see if that fixes. Oh, we're gonna have to do something similar to this. So we're gonna have to switch the state. Let items here default. Trying to add watch list item when state is success. This is going to be weak self. Okay, let's see why this did not update. Oops, because that should be a comment. All right, one thing at a time here. So remove symbol from watchlist. What does this return now? This should return ID as GraphQL ID, right? Oh, that is the item. Yeah. Okay, this needs to be then result and result. Yes, it does. Dot. Oh, I don't need that. I don't need that either. That's probably why I was complaining. Okay, now let's fix this. Items is going to be that. And we're going to want to add the watch list items. This is going to be append. Oh, yeah. This is because this is mutating. So we basically need to create a new array with that. So this is really just items plus this. Right, so something like that. Okay, it doesn't like this. Let's check out add symbol to watch list. There's a selection set. It has ID and symbol. It definitely has a member. All right, this I think is just Swift getting confused. Field remove symbol from watchlist must not. Oh, okay. So this doesn't need anything because it's just returning the ID. So let's fix that. Okay, so that should be fine there. We can undo that. Now it's just this. This. Oh, yeah, we can just do this. That fixes that. Now, okay. So we need to Yeah, we need to basically my Swift array foo is not the best. Will that work? Because we got to create a new array. Cannot use mutating. Oh yeah, var. Is there like a? Is there no way to wrap a new mutable array? It's because you can't change its length. So I believe is the issue, right? So you can't change its length, but we can create a new one that has the appropriate length. So you can create a new one that has items.count plus 1. Why doesn't it like, oh, repeating? Man, Swift arrays, why are you giving me such a hard time? Let's go back to the documentation. We should just be able to do this and then do new items dot append items and that, right? No? How about that? Explicit type. Oh, well, we can do this. Append contents of items has no member to watch list. It sure does. It's right there. Add watch list item mutation. Add symbol to watch list. This is. Oh, wait a minute. Data? This is on add symbol to watch list. Okay, maybe I got that wrong. So this needs to be this. No. Where is this guy? This is on add symbol to watch list data of add watch list item mutation, right? Dot add watch list item mutation dot data dot add symbol to watch list. Oops. Is this Swift just getting confused again? Very well might be. Nope, it's not finding. This is going to this. Oh, there we go. My bad. Typos. Okay. This should do the trick. So now for both add and remove, we appropriately update things. We should see no flashes of any kind. So let's add something. So add, no flash, that's good. If we move away and come back, everything's there. Not sorted appropriately, so that we need to fix. But the item is obviously not there either, which is great. We'll add this, and again, this isn't going to be sorted appropriately. And if we remove this, there will be no flash. Everything will be fine. We'll go back, and it'll be good to go. Okay, so sorting is important, and we should sort these items before they make it to the state. So we're going to put this here, and we're going to bring this up. New items. Okay. Sorted by. So we're going to add, let's say we add Twilio, which will be at the bottom. That'll have it there. It'll be good there. And then if we add, say, something in the middle here, that'll go there. And now it's in the right spot. Okay, cool. So again, whenever we do a mutation, right, add or remove, we are updating our cache or updating our state. We should probably remove this before we set the state, but that should do the trick, right? So now we no longer are doing an extra network call, right, trying to reload all of the values. So we're saving a network call. We are making sure that we keep our internal state intact as well. So our cache is all in line, which is good. You know, now we know how to do this with Apollo, or now you know how to do this with Apollo. So again, just to go back to this, right, what are the key things that you need to know? whenever you do a mutation of any kind, right, you need to directly update the cache. You need to open up a transaction, and then basically the magic to all of this is Swift in out parameters, where they hand you the data from a given query from the cache. You update that data, and then it writes it back to the cache, right? And so, if you're reading these docs, right, you open a transaction, you get the data of, say a given query, right? So here, right, we are getting this query. It's giving you the information back. We're updating it. And then in here, this is what was confusing me is they're actually reading it back and then ensuring that it's updated, right? But in this transaction, you update the data directly. So again, in this transaction, an update transaction for this query, you literally just update that information or update that data, and that's what's now in the query. So that's it for this stream. I think that's a pretty big improvement here to our watch list, which is great. And so now on to other cool things like notifications. I'm going to look into seeing if I can cast this, which would clean this up quite a bit, so we don't have this switch statement. But I have a feeling that you can't do that, so I'm going to look into that. So if anybody knows how to do that, let me know. But it's not immediately clear to me if you can do this. I mean, we can take a quick look here, but I don't think that this will work. Unless you can just do something as simple as if state is, I don't think you can do that. Right, yeah, you can't do, but I would think that you could do I would think that you could do if state as state dot maybe. Yeah, because it's not a type. It's just a case. Like it doesn't recognize this, and that isn't going to work either. So, I mean, this. Yeah, I don't know if you can do this. I think. I'm gonna have to research that. I don't think you can do that. If you know how to do that, please let me know. But I don't think you can actually do that. So, so that's it for the stream. Let me know if you got any questions.